In this video, we'll be making gluten-free Morning Glory Muffins. There once was a woman from Nantucket. But actually, the Morning Glory Muffin was created by a chef named Pam McKinstry from Nantucket. Thanks, Pam. Her recipe was so popular that it was published in Gourmet magazine in 1981. And today, we're gonna learn how to make it gluten-free. So let's get started. The first thing you'll want to do is preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit and grab your muffin tins. This recipe makes about 12 muffins, but depending on the size of your tins, you might have a few extra. So let's grease our pans. You can use cooking spray if that's what you use. I'm just gonna use a little bit of butter on a piece of paper towel and grease them up. Yeah, why don't I have spray at this point? It would be much faster. And we're gonna set these aside. First, we're gonna mix together all of our dry ingredients. The method for making these muffins is the same as any regular muffin recipe. The main difference for gluten-free is in the dry ingredients. For this recipe, we have 3 flours and 1 starch. We have a 3/4 cup of brown rice flour. Brown rice flour is a great whole grain flour and will provide structure for the muffins. A 3/4 cup of gluten-free oat flour. I like to use oat flour because it's nutrient dense and adds a wonderful taste and texture. And a 3/4 cup of almond flour. Almond flour is a fantastic ingredient to use for muffins. It makes them light and the high fat content keeps them moist. And a 1/2 cup of tapioca starch. A little bit of tapioca starch will also help keep them light and fluffy. Then we have a 3/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is a key ingredient to help bind your muffins together, so don't skip it. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. And feel free to reduce that if you're not a big fan of spice. But I personally think 2 teaspoons is perfect. A 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger. 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda. By the way, that's baking soda, not powder. There is a difference. And a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And let's whisk that all together. All right, let's set this aside and grab a separate bowl for our liquid ingredients. Into our separate bowl, we're going to crack 3 eggs. 1, 2, whoopsie, 3. I'm gonna go wash my hands. And let's whisk those up a bit just to break up the yolks. Next, let's add a 1/2 cup of vegetable oil. I'm using canola oil. And whisk. Then we have a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. My brown sugar was fairly lightly packed. Keep whisking as you go. A 1/2 cup of sour cream. One key tip for cooking and baking is that fat carries flavor. So I added sour cream to this recipe and it took the flavors from to If you don't tend to have sour cream on hand, you can also use a high-fat yogurt, or if you want to make these dairy-free, feel free to use a dairy-free yogurt. So let's mix that in. Then we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of maple syrup or honey. I'm using a delicious dark maple syrup. I'm just obsessed with dark maple syrup. It's one of the greatest joys of my life. And last but not least, 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. And I'm using my favorite Mexican vanilla. Oh, it's so good. And let's whisk that all together. And we'll set this aside. Next up, we're gonna prepare the add-ins for the muffins. So the grated carrots, apples, and chopped nuts. So let's start with the carrots. My carrots look gross, but I swear they're still good. The nice thing about this recipe though is if your carrots and apples aren't in pristine condition, you're gonna bake them, so it doesn't matter. We need 1.5 cups of grated carrots. I'm gonna start with 2 and we'll see where we're at. We'll probably do this, I was gonna say slow-mo, but fast-mo. What is the thing for fast motion? Cut off these nasty ends. I really should have a scrap bowl. Great life hack, while you're cutting stuff up or peeling stuff, have a scrap bowl ready so you don't have a big old mess. I guess I could be doing this over the scrap bowl. Let's grate them. It's gonna be great. We're gonna use the bigger grate, whatever you call that. This is honestly the longest part of this recipe. So if you have a food processor, jealous. You can gently pack it in. So 1.5. I'll use that in something later. Need a new grater. And now our apple. We need about a 3/4 cup of grated apple, so just one should do. I am gonna peel my apple before I grate it. You probably could make these with the peel on, but I don't really want that extra texture in there. For this recipe, it doesn't really matter what kind of apple you use, but I'm using a Honeycrisp. My challenge is always to get the peel off in one fell swoop. Can she do it? Ta-da! And I'm gonna slice out the core so that it's easier to grate. Scrap bowl. Let's get grating. Just eat the extra pieces. So a 3/4 cup. I'm gonna pack it down a little bit. This is one of those recipes where if you have a little bit of extra, just throw it in. It's not a big deal. Don't want it to go to waste. Just eat the rest of your apple. Cheers. And finally, the nuts. So we're gonna do a 3/4 cup of chopped walnuts, although this recipe would also be really great with some pecans. And if you don't like nuts, you can always just leave them out. So just gonna roughly chop these. That should be good. Put our nuts back into the bowl. The other add-ins in this recipe are a 3/4 cup of raisins and a 3/4 cup of unsweetened coconut. Now that we've prepared our add-ins, let's go grab our dry and wet ingredients. So now we just need to put everything together. First, we're going to pour our liquid ingredients into the dry, and I'm gonna mix that together with a spatula. Be sure to scrape right to the bottom of the bowl so you make sure that all the flour is incorporated. The nice thing about gluten-free baking is that you don't have to worry about over-mixing because there's no gluten that's going to develop and make your baked goods tough. And now let's fold in all of our add-ins. Let's start with our shredded things. Coconut, raisins, and walnuts. Fold it all together. By the way, this muffin batter is a bit thicker than your typical muffin batter, but the muffins will still be super moist because all of your carrots and apples and nuts will release the moisture when they're in the oven. So let's grab our muffin tins. I'm gonna use an ice cream scoop to help me scoop the batter into the pans. Let's scoop it out. That is probably way too much, but we can readjust it afterwards. So I'm just smoothing out the tops a little bit. You don't need to go crazy. Just make them look a little bit nicer. So I prefer to have a big muffin that has a big muffin top on it. So I really loaded these up. And because it is a thicker muffin batter, you can do that with these. But if you prefer a smaller muffin, then I would just use another pan and make a few extra muffins. Now I'm going to bake these for about 20 to 25 minutes. I baked my muffins for about 23 minutes. I checked them after 20 minutes and they just needed a couple more minutes to brown up on top. And my oven does tend to be a bit hot at the back, so I did rotate them halfway through the bake. Now we're gonna let them cool in the tins for about 10 minutes. Let's put these on the cooling rack. The best way to get these out is to take a butter knife, go into the side of the muffin, and lift it out. And if it doesn't come out easily, just move the knife around and make sure that it's not stuck anywhere. And then it should come right out. And now for my favorite part, the taste test. I choose you. I'm gonna cut it in half so you can see what the inside looks like. As you can see, it's super moist. Sorry, I took a big bite. This muffin has got it all. It's sweet, but it's not overly sweet. The texture is perfect. It's got a lovely crunch from the nuts. It's got some amazing spice from the cinnamon and ginger. It is so moist. I know everybody hates that word.
Moistly.
But it is beautifully moist. And it's the perfect way to start your day. Dare I say, it will make your morning glorious. You'll get one soon. After years of trying lots of gluten-free baked goods that are dry on the second day, these muffins are a miracle. They stay moist for several days, so you can eat them all week long, if they last that long. If you're looking for a couple of ways to spice up this recipe, one, if you're a citrus fan, you can add some orange zest, about a teaspoon. And if you're looking to reduce the sugar content, you can swap out the maple syrup with orange juice. Two, if you're a fan of pineapple, feel free to swap out the apple with some crushed pineapple. There you have it, gluten-free Morning Glory muffins. Now, these may be called Morning Glory muffins, but to me, they're anytime glory muffins. Happy baking!